I would like to welcome Dr. Duncan Law, who is going to talk to us now. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very tough act to follow, isn't it? I'm Duncan. I once took a taxi from Chester to that's as exciting as my bit's going to be. But I agreed to do my own introduction because with Fiona not being here, Jenny's got a million things she's got to do, so I know who I am, I think, as much as any of us can. I'm Duncan Law. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist by background. I'm a visiting professor of psychology at University College London, but particularly important, I think, for this next 20 minutes, I'm the developer of the goal-based outcome tool, which has a lot of ideas that sit behind it. About 20 minutes, I was asked to talk about the goal-based outcome tool very briefly, and I decided I would be ambitious and give you the origin story of the goal-based outcome tool, because I think it's important to know where these things come from, the history of these things, to be able to understand where they're at now and where they might go in the future. So it's a 20-year history in 20 minutes. I'm going to miss out a big chunk in the middle. But everyone has an origin story. Batman has his origin story. I wonder if Mitch is secretly Batman. He's probably gone off on a mission just now. So this is the origin story of the goal-based outcome tool, not nearly as interesting as the Batman origin story. Like most things, it started very simply. It just started with a blank sheet of paper. And it started, sort of, I say, 20 odd years ago, when I was a young man, the hair and youthful looks. And we had a problem. As Mitch was saying, adversity leads to sort of change. And we, like this was working in a children's mental health service in the south of England. And we, like all mental health services at that point, and still do now, massively underfunded. We had a growing waiting list, and we wanted to do something about it. And we were a team who would stop and reflect on what we were doing once a quarter, to review what we'd done the previous quarter and think about what the challenge ahead was and try and come up with solutions. And at this particular team meeting, we decided that what we wanted to do was to reduce the waiting list. And we knew that one of the things that is helpful in terms of moving any therapeutic intervention forward, but any work with any child, whatever you're doing, is about having engagement with them. If we're going to be technical about it, it's having a good therapeutic alliance or good task alliance. And for that, we thought, well, there's a very simple step that we can do here, which is to ask kids what they want. What do you want from coming to our service? And that might seem like an obvious thing, but 20 years ago, that wasn't the question that most people asked. The training back then was to be a proper professional, and a proper professional meant you knew best, you knew about the kid's life because you had a good training, which we now know is nonsense. But back then, it wasn't nonsense, that was the way things worked. So we would tell the kid what that we felt was best for them, and we decided to turn that on its head and start asking them what they wanted, because we thought that would create better engagement, better therapeutic alliance. So we started asking about their goals. What do you want from coming here? Because we saw that our job, we changed our mindset, which we saw our job was to get people to where they wanted to be. But in order to do that, you've got the very sometimes complex thing of finding out where that child wants to get to. Mitch had a very clear plan about what he wanted, but that's not true of most kids. Every child will have an idea about what they want to be different, but not every child can tell us up front, for all sorts of good reasons, that they might have lots of vague ideas, but our job might be to help them discover what they want to be different in their lives. Or it might help them decide. They've got a million things that they want to do, but which one is the one that they're going to sort of take a next step in doing? Or to choose, or to dare to share what their ambitions are. Because lots of kids that you work with will have been told that they can't do things, that what they want to do isn't right. And so when we're faced with them, a sort of a helpful practitioner, asking them, what do you want to be different in your life? They might know, but they're not going to tell us because we might be another person in a long line of adults in their lives who've told them that's not a good idea. So the work, it's a very simple idea to just ask people what they want and then they tell you and then you do whatever it is that's helpful to get them there. It sounds very straightforward when we say it, but you'll all know that it's a really complex thing when you try and do it with real kids, with real backgrounds that the kids have. So we decided we're going to start doing this. We're going to start asking each new family or child who came into our service what they wanted, what their goals were effectively. So we decided on a Wednesday, we decided for the next week we would ask everybody who came into the service and was new to the service what they wanted. We'd start shifting our way of practice because we thought that would lead to more effective work and quicker, more effective therapy, and it might help us bring the waiting list down so we could offer more things to more kids than we had been previously. We started off with good intentions. The following week we agreed to meet back to see how we got on. And when we met back the following Wednesday, a week later, only one person had asked one child what they wanted to be different. And that's not because our ambitions left us. It's because once you leave a day where you've thought about something, which we had in our team day, maybe a bit like today, you get back into real life and all your good intentions when you're sitting in a room just get taken away by all the emails and the demands on your time once you leave the room. And that's exactly what happened to us. We just forgot. We forgot to ask. We went back to our usual ways of doing. So we decided that we would start, be more helpful and pin what was then just a piece of paper to the front of the paper files from the days of paper files before everything went electronic, which just said, don't forget to ask what people want from coming here. And we met a week's time, and most people had asked most of the people that had come into our service. So it just started with a blank piece of paper, just started with an idea. We wrote on the blank piece of paper, don't forget to ask people what they want, and it made a huge difference. Over time, we decided, well, if we're going to ask people what they want from coming here, we also ought to ask them, where are you at already? What have you already managed to do yourself or with the resources around you to get you, even if it's some way towards your goal? So we started adding just some simple scaling and a bit like in the next step cards, it's just the numbers 0 to 10. There's nothing clever about it. It just gives a way of letting people know where they're at and where they might want to get to. We also started developing some best practice principles about how do we do it. We shared as a team, if I've asked this family, it didn't work at all, but I've asked another family and I did it in a slightly different way and that was more helpful. And so we started developing best practice principles about how to do this, what seems like an easy thing, but it's deceptively simple, how we might do it better and do it effectively with real kids. And that developed into the tool and the guidance notes that go with it. And since then, the tool has kind of spread all over the world. It's got a real life of its own. So lots of Northern Hemisphere, some really interesting projects going on. Another Kathmandu, second mention for Kathmandu in the morning. And they've started adopting using the goal-based outcome tool. And there's some really interesting cultural problems in terms of doing that. In a respect-based culture, if a professional asks a child, what do you want? What do you want to be different? It gives the child an immediate dilemma. Because if they answer, the dilemma is that they're showing disrespect to the professional because they're saying things that the professional ought to be able to ought to be telling them. But if they don't answer, then they're being disrespectful because they're not answering a question that a professional's asked them. So immediately there are these cultural problems of how do we introduce this idea in a way that fits with the culture that it's being embedded in. And you all work in very multicultural environments, and so thinking about that is really important. It's translated into, I think it's 12 different languages at the moment. But the most important thing is that as it's spread across the world, there are now a community of practitioners using these ideas, and the real value of that, again, like the value of today, is that it brings people together with real-world experience of trying to do these, what seem like simple things but get quite complex, to share good ideas and share good practice. The most you'll learn is from each other in the room than you will, well, certainly from what I have to say. But what I want to do now is just sort of share some of these, very quickly, some of these ideas around best practice that have been developed from this, what's now a worldwide community who are working with goals and using the goal-based outcome tool. There are three broad themes. So there's the principles, the ideas and philosophy that sit behind it, and that comes from the origin of the tool. The processes, the steps that you might follow if you're working in this way, and some best practice sort of principles about what you actually do when the child's sitting in front of you. And my top tip for you, if you only remember one thing that I've said, don't use the word goals with kids. Doesn't make much sense to them. Goals is a technical language that we use as professionals. Use everyday language with kids, like, what do you want to be different? What are your hopes? What are your aims? Don't use the word goals. It confuses kids and it confuses adults, frankly, unless you've really explained what you mean by that after the child's already told you what they want. So if you ask kids, what do you want to be different? And they tell you, if they can tell you, then you might say, okay, we might call these the goals of our work together. The goals are the things that you want to be different. And then you could introduce the language, and don't use it up front. Okay, quickly talking about the principles, because this is the backdrop to everything that we try to do. The important thing is be context aware. So understand the context in which this child is presenting to us, the positive bits of their context, but also the barriers that might make life more difficult for them than it might for other kids, like deprivation. I've spoken to a lot of people this morning who've talked about working in schools and communities where there's really high levels of deprivation. There's also the racism, which we know interferes with people's abilities to get on with their lives, sexism, homophobia, and so on. So being aware of the context in which the child's presenting, but also thinking about how can we empower children and young people to achieve, to move forward despite some of the barriers that they might have. And the two go hand in hand. And then within the room, there's the idea of agency for the young person. What are they able to do themselves, and what's the limits of their agency? Who else is in their support network which can help them achieve the things that they want to be different in their life? I was really struck by Mitch, and of course what Mitch has done is quite extraordinary, but my guess is that the support team around him were as much part of that ability to achieve as it was Mitch's own sort of drive and determination. So understanding the agency that kids have, but also understanding the limits of that agency and where they might need extra help. And the bit that sits at the centre of it all is about collaboration. How do we work with the young people in order to achieve the things that they want to make the changes that they want to make? And that requires shared expertise. The expertise we bring of having worked with lots of other kids, about the sort of knowledge that we bring about what we do, but also seeing the child and the family around them as being real experts in their own lives. And how can we mesh those two things together to achieve more and better than either of us can on our own? This is some really great work that's come out from Canada, where they've spoken to a lot of young people who've had experience of working with goals. And these are some of the things they say, if you give kids the opportunity to really take their ideas seriously, they'll tell us a lot. But here are some of the things that they say are central to them. So if you're going to work with goals, it has to be a shared decision-making process. So they don't want the full responsibility of deciding everything about their lives. That's too much. What they want to do is to collaborate and make decisions with us about what's helpful and what might not be. And it's not making it a one-off decision, but it's sort of seeing that decision as a sort of continued process. Then they talk about, this was a clinical population, so they talk about clinicians, but this is anyone who works with kids, that the really important thing is the kind of how we turn up to do the work, the stance that we bring. Is it a stance where we want to collaborate and help them achieve, and we'll be really interested in them and what they want? Or is it one where, like I was 20 odd years ago, overly professional, and because my training had taught me that I know best, which is absolutely not true. And that the conversations have to centre on what that young person wants rather than what we want for them. We can bring that in, and that's really important, and that's part of that shared decision making, but we have to listen to that, certainly. Right, just do this very quickly. So for me, there are 4 steps that are important in terms of working with goals, the process, and it starts with listening well, as most good human interactions do. This is a quote from young people who are young advisors. They're employed by their local mental health service. These are kids from New Zealand, and they're from the indigenous Maori population. And in the Maori population, this is true of all humans, but storytelling is really important. And we were having a conversation with these kids about one of the things that practitioners sometimes find difficult is talking to kids, and then what sometimes feels like a clunky shift from talking to the kid about all sorts of things that are of interest to them, and then asking them about what they want to be different in their lives, moving the conversation to goals. What these young people said is that there shouldn't be a transition like that. That if you listen well to the stories we tell, our goals will emerge from those stories. So we don't have to ask if we do our job well, we just need to listen well, and the kids will tell us whether they realise it or not. Our job then is to reflect back to the kids. So I think what I've heard from you is that these are the things that are difficult in your life, or these are the things that you want to achieve in your life. Might these be things that we work together on? And that leads us to, if you're then interested in tracking the progress, this is where the goal-based outcome tool comes in, and it sticks to its roots of it's a reminder of asking about what kids want, and then you can use it to help track progress towards the goal, but it should also lead to further conversations that are facilitated by the numbers that kind of come out from those conversations. The numbers are always secondary to the human interaction. The human interaction is the most important thing. For those of you who haven't seen it, this is all it is. It's the numbers 0 to 10, and there are these 3 anchor points around the tool. So 0 starts with you've not made any progress towards your goal. 10 is your goal fully achieved. You decide with the kids that you're working with about, are you going to work with them until things are at 10, which I advise you don't do. But the best way to do it is to say, we're going to help you, we're going to try and do what we can to move you in the direction of 10, but we're not going to work with you until you get there, because you don't need that. We want to breed collaboration rather than dependency, and we want to manage expectations. There are some bits of paper that come with it, but you don't have to use them. It's better if you use it in a conversational style. This might be a goal to feel comfortable in social situations. Then you can speak to the young person, ask them to say where they feel they're at right now. And then you can carry on doing the tracking if that's a useful thing to do. If you want to be very technical about it, it's an idiographic patient-rated outcome measure, so you can use the numbers to measure the impact of the work that you do with young people. All that means is the goals are set by the young person rather than, for those who've experienced, of sort of symptom-based measures that are set by someone who's never stepped foot in any of the schools that you might work in or any of the places you work. And I think it's really important that we track progress. There are myths in working with children that interventions, talking therapies, and I mean therapy in a very broad sense, at worst do no harm. We now know that's not true, that we can do real damage to kids with good intentions. So it's really important that we see whether good intentions are having an impact on the child's life. And the best way to measure that, I would argue, is making a difference to the things that are important to those children themselves. Okay, I'm going to end with resources. This was a very lightning tour, but there's more out there if you want it. Here's a resource. I'm very happy to come and talk for longer, to consult with you. I'll make these slides available and my email address is on there. Very happy to be contacted by you. This has not been a huge amount of time to go through these things. There's the website. So this hosts the latest guidance around working with goals. All the different translations are on there once they've all been approved. And I thought there was another. Okay, let me just go back to the website itself, because this may be helpful understanding a little bit more of the context in which some of you work in. So the goal-based outcome tool, really accessible, but there's a piece of work that's going on around making it even more accessible, specifically for children with autism spectrum disorders and learning disabilities, to simplify it even further. And we're gathering together a community of practice of people who work with those kind of kids to think about how do we make a very simple idea even more accessible. Watch this space, all that will be up on the website as well. Okay, I don't want to keep you from lunch, but thank you for listening. I think have we got time for questions? Or
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time for questions. Does anyone have a question? Mike, get the other mic.
Just wanted to check, are the goal-based outcomes for certain age groups? Is there different brackets, or is it for anybody and everybody?
it can be for anybody and everybody, and the important bit is if you're using it with younger kids, they might not be able to have the concept of time and progress, but that's where the principles that sit behind it are really important, is even if we can't get to a goal with them, to have the conversation with them about what they might want to be different in their lives. That's the really important bit, which is true for everybody. The getting to the goal, the getting to the rating, the roughly 8-year-olds can do it. But if it's younger than that, then that's where it's helpful to have conversations with parents or teachers.
I just wondered if you had any thoughts, when you mentioned the clinician stance and approach, how we bring our medical colleagues on board with moving away from that expert patient approach and the damage that potentially does for some people.
Have you got particular medics in mind? We had psychiatrists
All
on.
of them.
Okay, well,
Consultants specifically.
the psychiatrists that we had in our team, and they were unusual psychiatrists that they came on board with this really easily. And I think the bit that all practitioners want, whether you're medically trained or not, is to do a good job. And I think if people recognise that this is a tool that can help them do a good job, help them do what they do better and quicker, and that's what tools are for, then that can be a persuasive argument. But it's also quite frightening to give up the power that feeling you know best has. And that's something that sometimes gets in the way of people having better and more collaborative conversations with young people, I think.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Any more questions? Just one here and then one just over here, Jenny. Thank you.
Just to ask how far off your elderly autism side of things is?
It's being tested right now. It was presented as a conference last month by a speech and language therapist who's sort of leading on it now. We're starting to gather this community of practice to sort of look at it and test it out a bit more. The development's been involved people with learning disability and autism spectrum disorders and adults as well, and parents as well as practitioners. So we hope there'll be something up on the website early next year, maybe springtime next year, and then like with the goal-based outcome tool itself, it's licensed under Creative Commons, which means it's free to be used by everybody forever. Even I can't take back the license if I wanted to, and I don't want to because I want this to be a free resource. The same will be true of the GBOA, we're calling it, so the goal-based outcome accessible version.
In the team I work in, we're in primary school, so we're working with very younger children.
Yeah.
And we've always been encouraged to make goals smart, which younger children find really difficult. I was just wondering what your views were.
I find it difficult too. And I think it becomes, so there's a good reason for making goals smart. The research evidence is really clear that smart goals tend to be more effective than less smart goals. There's a real problem with that. Not all kids can make smart goals, and with younger kids particularly, it becomes really, really difficult because you have less of a good concept of time, and time, of course, is the T in smart. But I think it comes back to Mitch's point, which I think was really important, which is, the R in smart is sometimes described as realistic, isn't it? And I think that's sometimes misinterpreted by practitioners as what do we think is realistic for that child? And I think what Mitch has really blown out of the water, if we needed it, is that it's not up to people around kids or adults in their lives to decide what's realistic for that child. We're constantly being surprised by children's resilience and their ability to achieve despite all the difficulties in their lives. So I think that's a problem I have with it. And the other bit is, we've said that the reason behind this was really about creating better alliance with kids, a better connection with them. And we do that by showing that we're interested in their intentions, we're interested in their minds, we're interested in their unique minds. And that's one of the things that creates better therapeutic alliance. That's the stuff that creates change. Sometimes kids experience, if we try and smarten goals with them, that they feel that they're being pigeonholed. And that loses the therapeutic alliance. So the research evidence says two things very clearly. Smart goals more effective, therapeutic alliance really effective. There is a point where the two go together, but if they're not, if kids are feeling pigeonholed, then go with therapeutic alliance every time, because that's the real winner.
Got one more, Vicky.
Thank you.
My point was the same really, it was about the smart goals, because I think sometimes children and young people tell us what they want to change,
Yeah.
but then we almost diminish that by saying, oh okay, let's think about how we word that,
Yeah.
because we need to make it smart, and it perhaps takes away from what they want to change. It was nice to see yours on there was, to be more confident in social situations.
Yes, which isn't very smart, is it? And I use that particularly because it's not smart, but it's a realistic kind of thing that kids will say to us.
Yeah.
We should, if I did the longer version of this, I'd talk about the research evidence, and one of the things in the research evidence is that approach goals are more effective than avoidance goals. So what we mean by that is wanting to be happier, something in the future, which is an approach goal, is more effective than not wanting to be sad anymore, because that's something you're trying to get away from. So things that you're driving towards are more effective than things that you're trying to escape from. When we're having conversations with kids, if the kids say to us, I don't want to be sad anymore, it's helpful for us to say, okay, let's think about what that might look like when you're not sad anymore. And you might get them to talk about life when they might feel happier, which is a helpful intervention in its own right, by the way. But if the child tells us or suggests to us that we're going too far away from where they're at now by talking about happiness when they're feeling really sad and can't imagine feeling happy, then we're losing that therapeutic alliance again at the expense of... So those suggestions are helpful for us to make, but we need to be really attuned as practitioners that we're being tentative and making a suggestion, but we're going at the speed and we're privileging the most important thing, which is a good connection with the child themselves.
Any more questions for Duncan? He's just about done. So just want to say a big thank you, Duncan. Thanks very much for coming on. Thank you very much. It was really good to hear about the origins of goal-based outcomes. I know obviously it's something I use in my daily practice. It underpins the Next Step Cards approach, so it was lovely to kind of hear about the origins and that move towards collaboration. This afternoon is going to be really experiential. You're going to have a go at kind of putting this more into practice, and I think it will help with that idea of SMART goals, which I think can feel untangible for kids sometimes, but it'll help you think about actually how do I do more of what matters, and that's what we're trying to get kids to do, isn't it? And I think the Next Step Cards, just to give a plug for Next Step Cards, seeing as though that's why we're all here, really helps us think with the child about those things that are in the red, those things that are in the amber, those things that are in the green, and then it helps us give validation to the things that a child hasn't got control of changing at this moment in time, but move towards picking something to focus on where they've got autonomy for change. So I think that bit is really important, and it's a part that I really love about the Next Step Cards. So we're just going to spend, how long have we got until lunch, Jenny? About 5 minutes, so just about 5 minutes on your tables. Obviously we've heard a lot this morning. We've heard it in action first of all from Mitch, and we've heard about this tool, and you know, even if you've not heard of it specifically as goal-based outcome tool, you're all using it because you've all done the Next Step Cards training. So what we'd like you to do, if it's okay, is just spend a few minutes reflecting on this morning. Really, this is your time to have a chat on the table, and we'd maybe just like to take a little bit of feedback, and then we'll get into lunch. We'll get you out to lunch on time, okay? So if you have a chat on your tables, there are some post-it notes for people who don't want to some people don't like to speak out in front of a large group, that's fine. But if there is any reflections from anything that you've heard this morning that you'd like to share, we'll have an opportunity to share, but if not, just pop it on your post-it notes and we'll collect them at lunch. So we'll just give you 5 minutes on your tables for that now. Thank you.